Hey everybody, TBC here. Well, we finally got a bit of news on what is coming up for Daybreak. Now, it's no surprise that this was coming down the pipeline. There's been some job postings over the summer that alluded to the fact that they're making a new Everquest game. But we've been down this road before, and I'm someone that doesn't like to get hyped over new MMOs. I don't do any like Kickstarters or anything like that. I've never put a cent into anything like Pathian because I like to kind of explore games for the first time when they come to release and almost going in somewhat blind. So as to not kind of ruin or spoil my experience with alphas, betas and whatever else. But EverQuest looks like a new game is coming, so I thought let's have a react to what was said and see if we can analyze and break down what this game potentially could look like. Now bear in mind, this presentation by Daybreak's owner EG7 was to the financial markets. It was purely for capital and aimed at their current investors and potential future investors as a way to showcase what the company plans to do with capital over the following years. So there's no information about any games. It's not kind of a product showcase. They don't show anything. It's purely financial, but you can glean some information, and they do talk a little bit about what they are aiming for the franchise. So let's go ahead and get right on into it. So the first slide we're going to quickly look at is kind of Daybreak's performance over the last years, and you can kind of see this is over time in the corner, and this is as big as they made it on the webcast, so we'll have a go. That they've very much plateaued over the last couple of years. They're no longer EG7's biggest earner from their group of companies. They are very much in almost maintenance mode for what they're doing, and if you read the text, they do expect a modest decline in revenue over the next few years for what is a classic portfolio. So let's have a listen, and we'll pause it as we go.
So going back to 2018 through LTM second quarter. So revenue growth has been, you could see the spike in 2020, and then 2021 you see the drop. 2020 spike is related to the pandemic, and then
a lot of people played MMOs during the pandemic. Aradoon was the TLP that launched on Everquest at the time, and it was probably one of the most populated I think that there's ever been. It came along right at a really good time, just as everyone was being forced to stay at home. So yeah, you can see why there was a spike in revenues there, more people playing MMOs.
You see the drop in 21 as pandemic effect was, sort of going down. And 2022, you see the jump because of Magic Online that was brought into our portfolio beginning part of 2022. And then LTM period so far, we're tracking below it. 2023 has been a slower year so far. And then when you look at the profitability, similar trends. So you see from 19 to 2020, big jump, and then it's slowly declining. And there's a couple of reasons behind the decline there. One of them is related to obviously cost increases that everyone is experiencing. So is Daybreak. So there's cost increases that we're dealing with, and also some level of fixed cost component as revenues come down. There's a fixed cost component that does eat into the margin more, as not everything is variable. But nonetheless, it's this highly stable portfolio that we've been managing. Everquest is turning 25 next year.
Believe that, 25 years and still making revenue.
It's a mixed portfolio of games where you see certain games a lot more stable than the others, and we'll go through that with some additional figures here. This is our monthly gross revenue trend by game. So there's a lot of lines here.
This is a really interesting slide. Let's see if I can skip. I don't think they make it full screen at any point. Oh, they do. There we go. So this I find is a really interesting slide in terms of revenue, and yeah, there's a lot of lines in. So I'm kind of, what we're looking for is the gray EQ line. We can look at the EQ2 line a little bit as well, and it's a little bit interesting. You can definitely see where the spikes tend to come in EverQuest, and we know TLPs usually release around May. So you got May 20, you see the spike going up down the grey line. That's when Aradoon was released. and then over time it wanes. The spike at the mid-year point is for the new expansion that comes out every year that they make, and again people play it, declines, and we carry forward. This big spike here in May 21, the Mischief, when the Mischief server came out, Mischief and Fallblade, a very well received TLP, and you can see it brought in revenue. That was people buying Chrono, that was people subbing, definitely went up, and of course Daybreak points as well, and that maintained for the year. You don't see a big spike down, you see a gradual decline, which is, you know, what you kind of expect. And again, another spike for expansion, release, and a big decline until May of 22, where we get another spike up, not as big as the Mischief, and that was for the Jelinek server when that was came out in May, and again gradually declines until we get to May 23, and you can see another spike up for the Oakwind server there. But it's interesting to me because you can see over time it's kind of losing a lot of that volatility, and it's kind of, those lines are getting smaller between the years. So that's kind of your core player base that's spending money, and it doesn't typically go below that on a monthly basis, and you get the spike ups when the expansion releases. What is so sad to look at on this is just the utter decline of EQ2. It's one of their worst performing games, down there with PlanetSide 2. Real shame. I really liked Everquest 2 on release. I remember running around the Isle of Refuge or whatever, but I didn't stick with it. Although it was fun, it was a very completely different game when it came out compared to previous Everquest, and you wonder how much time it has got left if it's only kind of bringing in 500k. I believe that's in thousands on a monthly basis. Will that be the first one to go? I don't know. They talk about their other group of companies like Big Blue Bubbles, a big, like the modern, I think it's mobile, to make some kind of mobile game that creates crazy revenue for them. That's their biggest company now. And then where we want to skip ahead to it is where they talk about the future for Daybreak. So this is the part now where they talk about what their plans are for Daybreak moving forward in terms of investment and when they expect release and kind of what their approach is. The three main franchises that they're targeting for Daybreak, your H1Z1, MechWarrior, and Everquest. And if you can remember, the old Sony Online was going to split into three separate studios. You had Darkpaw that was working on the Everquest franchise. There was another group that's working on what at the time was like PlanetSide, and another group working on the H1Z1. H1Z1 was a fun little game. It's good to look at them bringing that back in terms of a good old live service. MechWarrior as well. That's an iconic franchise from Microsoft. So it's interesting that they're looking at a small scale co-op multiplayer. Is that kind of like a Titanfall thing? Make it faster. MechWarrior has always been a particularly slow, more methodical game than like Titanfall, but maybe that's the idea that they're targeting. And then finally they come to Everquest as well. So let's skip and we'll start listening when they talk about Everquest. All right. So now this is where they started talking about Everquest and what the plan is for this franchise and what they're going to be looking at producing over the coming kind of years in terms of investment. So let's give it a listen and we'll react along the way.
This one is our what we consider to be our most important IP.
That's good to know. They value Everquest. It certainly is up there. I think a lot of people, when EG7 came in, was expecting more investment early on, and maybe that hasn't been the case of what people were expecting. They've been very much more methodical. We've seen some improvement with like new clients and new technology, new back-end technology for these very much aging games. So it's interesting to see what direction they will take now with the IP moving forward.
It's fantasy MMORPG. It's literally the one that ushered in the golden era of MMOs. So like World of Warcraft was based off of Everquest.
He's not wrong. The original devs from World of Warcraft all played in Everquest. They got they're all in the same guild. It's how actually a lot of those guys met as well. The story and the history there is very known. That they took a lot of inspiration from Everquest for World of Warcraft.
And they will say that actually. I'm not making it up. Daybreak would be the one doing it. IP ownership, massively multiplayer, hybrid premium plus MTX, similar to what the H1Z1 is.
Hybrid premium plus MTX. That's interesting. Hybrid model MTX microtransactions. Some people will be turned off by that immediately, but it's here to stay. It's in pretty much every MMO ever at this point, and it creates a stable and future revenue source for games. So I don't expect it to go away, but I do expect it to be things like cosmetics. And as we know, XP pots have been a huge revenue source on a lot of these TOP servers for Daybreak as well. So expect to see more of the same. So that's no surprise. I'm not concerned by that.
Live service, I say 30 million plus. I can't really put any more accuracy there. This one requires a lot more work to figure out where. But we're not starting development for this for a while.
30 million? Does that seem a little bit on the low end for a full MMO? Yes, they said it's not pinned down yet, and they've kind of got the plus there, and they're not starting it anytime soon. So that's the key takeaway. This is not going to be coming in the next couple of years. This is very much a 4 or 5 year plan on what they're doing with the franchise, and they've not even got the funds there yet to pump into it and actually start this thing going. But 30 million for a full-fledged MMO seems a little light to me. And I'm just thinking about some other MMOs and budgets. I've heard things like 50 million is fairly typical for a standard MMO. So that 30 seems a little low. But you have to remember Daybreak, they've already got the server infrastructures. They've already got the studio kind of in place. They've already got the technology. So they're not having to pump time, money, and effort into creating that. So that will certainly lower the cost. I'll bring in any future game.
Investment 2025 if we do this for 28 release.
So that's a big one. They're not even going to start looking at this or putting any money into it until 2025 with a targeted release for 2028. So at least one good thing, it will come out, if it sticks to these targets, well before Pantheon gets past its first alpha. I joke, but probably not far off on that. I'll put a diary on for 3-4 years and we'll see where we're at with Pantheon. I hope that game comes out, but no, not holding my breath there.
But the idea behind what we're trying to do here is, I think, so From Software, the guys that did Elden Ring.
Okay, so they mentioned From Software, Elden Ring, some more hardcore games.
Love them in terms of their model.
Okay, so they like their model.
Right, and they spent $30 million making Elden Ring, and they made over $1 billion from that. But that's misleading to a certain extent because they spent 13 years making the same game but different name, and then they continue to improve it.
Kind of right. If you look across their portfolio, they kind of iterated from Dark Souls 2, Elden Ring. It's the same base game for the most part, but with enhancements and improvements over time.
So really 80-10-10 model there too, and then they got to the...
So the 80-10-10 model is 80% existing and kind of like 20% new, so to speak, into a game. So you're using ASIC's technology from the previous iteration and pumping it into a new one.
That outcome, successful outcome. And then Armored Core 6 came out, like normally people wouldn't play that because From Software made it, so everyone's like, let's try it because they made it, it must be good. And then I think they did really well with that as well.
Yeah, Armored Core is an interesting one. Not my kind of style of game. I like to watch people play it sometimes. I've seen a little bit on Twitch and YouTube of it, but I get frustrated sometimes with those kind of games when I can't beat a boss.
But the idea is that what From Software has done, I think over the last decade or so in gaming that people didn't think was possible, is that there was this big push in game development to make it everything super user friendly.
Yeah, you think about that over the years, even in MMOs, how like user friendly, how streamlined, how handholdy MMOs have got, and you only have to look at World of Warcraft for that, how extremely handholdy it became. And maybe that's come back a little bit in the last expansion or two, but for a while it was extremely handholdy. You like held your hand. Nothing was ultimately that challenging.
Meaning make it easier, make it more accessible. And then From Software did something very different, which is that it's the type of thing, and I personally have 200 hours in it because literally one night I tried to beat one boss all night long, ultimately couldn't beat it.
Sounds like me.
But the point is that they built this like where you bang your head against the wall type of gameplay, but it's just a phenomenal experience, hardcore as they get. And people thought that's not really commercial. Well, 20 million people bought the game, so it's clearly commercial. But what they did is change how gamers perceive gameplay. And I think what that means is EverQuest original one is a hardcore game.
EverQuest 1 is a hardcore game, a little less so these days, but it takes a lot to get into. If you're a new player coming today into EverQuest, you've got a learning curve, even if you were to start on a TLP.
Many years we thought about how do you make it more accessible. We're not. Our view is, you know what? Thank you, From Software. You said hardcore is okay. It could be mass market, and we want to try to bring back that original experience as much as we can for EverQuest. That's where we're starting. But it's not a remaster. It would be a brand new game.
Okay, a few important takeaways from that section right there. Hardcore. Okay, that's good. We want hardcore games, and I think he's talked a lot about From Software and what they've done, and 100% right. Those are hardcore games where failure can be rewarded in the grand scheme of things. You don't start a fight expecting to win. In fact, with From Software games, you tend to start a fight with a boss expecting to lose. So, but then that reward you get at the end for actually beating it is that sense of accomplishment. It is good. When I finally beat that first boss in Dark Souls after a million attempts, it felt good. And I would also look at like the WoW hardcore kind of servers. Those have an interest so much that they made official servers where you can go on and you have a single life and that's it. So there is a hardcore player base that wants to play harder MMOs that don't just want hand holding. So that's exciting for one. And what did he say then at the end?
From Software, you said hardcore is okay. It could be mass market, and we want to try to bring back that original experience as much as we can for EverQuest. That's where we're starting.
Bring back the original experience for EverQuest. So that kind of, you're in a world, here you go, and we're not holding your hand, go out and explore, and you might come across a mob in your newbie zone that's going to absolutely smash your face in. Just please no corpse runs.
But it's not a remaster, it would be a brand new game.
It's not going to be remastered, so they're not just going to take the EverQuest world and put a new face paint on it. So that's good, and a lot of people say they want that, but I don't. The world is extremely dated. You only have to, and I've said this before, like the west side of Antonica, that whole is barren. There's nothing there. There's very little reason to ever kind of go there. In fact, you want to get over to Freeport really as soon as you can. So I don't think like an exact copy is the right thing to go. I generally think the world may be like too big to start with as well. Would be better maybe being a bit smaller, but having some really fun dungeons and whatnot and content to do. So that's kind of exciting about that, and that they are not coming with a theme park MMO that's going to walk your hand, like hold your hand all the way through. This is going to be hardcore. You dropped in a world, maybe have at it. It's yours to explore.
But we do believe that. I mean, it's one of those things. If I said today, there's a new EverQuest coming out in 2026, like that'll be global gaming news because it's a beloved IP.
It is beloved IP. There's a lot of, I'd say, lapsed players out there, or people that are interested in MMOs. You only have to look. There's people so desperate for new MMOs all the time. They come on, they play it for a moment, but the content's just not there, and it very quickly dies away. There's millions of those, like New World. Everyone was excited about this new hardcore, PvP kind of MMO, and it just didn't hit. And I played it, and I was turned off. Like that game immediately as soon as I tried going in water and my character was walked on the bottom. I'm like, how can you release a product like that? And I uninstalled the game straight away.
We do think there's a huge opportunity, but once again, we want to stay true to what the original experience was ultimately.
There you go. They want to be true to the ultimate experience, and there's a fantastic opportunity to make a hardcore MMO. But that's kind of all we've got, and we're looking at 2028 at the earliest for a release date. So that's going to be 4 years. Everquest is going to be pushing 30 years old by then. So you wonder what the future has for their legacy games, especially for like maybe EQ2, which isn't bringing in the money anywhere near as much as Everquest. I do suspect Everquest will see a big uptick next year for the 25th year anniversary. I do think the devs will go hard on a TLP server. Whether it's the TLP server to end all TLP servers, I don't know. We've been through this before. At the 20th year, when we had Mangler and Celos, didn't exactly set the world alight. But they've had time and they've learned since then. So I'm excited. Clearly the senior leaders at Daybreak are going to be looking at the financials and seeing which MMO brought in the most money. Which TLP brought in the most money, and it's clear that was Mischief when you looked at that financial data right there, that big jump that it had. So this is exciting news that there is a new MMO potentially on the horizon, and it's a very long horizon, so don't get your hopes up. I'm not. They've not even put the money in yet, and as it said at the bottom, it's in the ideation phase, so they're sketchbooking. They've got people doodling. Maybe they're having one meeting a month talking about ideas on what it could look like, and so don't expect anything on this anytime soon. I wouldn't expect to hear. They're much further along in the process. They were burnt by Landmark and Everquest Next. When you had the ponytail dude coming out saying this is the best thing ever, here's the technology running and the game's real and it's going to happen, and it just wasn't. And so they're not going to come out and rush with any kind of announcement about Everquest 3 or Everquest, whatever they decide to call it. We will see what happens there. Let me know your comments below. Are you excited for a new Everquest? Did what they were saying in this capital market presentation have any relevance to it, that they're potentially looking at making more hardcore of experience of a game, or are you just completely checked out and you're happy with Everquest 1? Let me know down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe. I've got plenty more videos coming about Everquest, my experience in Velia so far, amongst other videos. So thank you so much for watching. I am the Brick Canuck, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.